Hello and welcome to this educational video on how to select a DMR Master, in particular for usage on the DUNoW network through the Pi-Star software. I'm your host, John Crook. My call is N9UPC. I'm the sysop owner for the 3103 Chicago AMCOM DMR network on there. And once again, this is part of the DUNoW, the Digital User Network of Wisconsin system, which resides primarily on the AMCOM, Amateur Communications Network, Chicago server. So in this episode here and the training video, we're going to go ahead and talk about what you need to do in order to select a DMR server and to get on that DMR server for operation. This is, of course, once again, going to be using the Pi-Star software, and I happen to be running this on a Zoom-Spot, but multiple other devices do exist out there that are Pi-Star related or use the Pi-Star software. So regardless of what actual physical radio device you're using or whatever, I am going to be just talking about Pi-Star software in general here. So the first thing you'll notice here is that this is my Pi-Star dashboard that I have set up here. If you notice, I have no modes enabled on it, and then I have no network statuses on there. I have thrown a frequency in there. This is the current firmware of the Zoom Spot that I'm using, which is the current one that's currently out there. And then it also gives me my reference for my TXCO. What I'm first going to do is I need to get into the configuration of the device. So I'm going to go ahead up here in the upper right-hand corner and click configuration. Now, if you have not logged in to your Pi-Star device through the means of how you're controlling it here. So an example, I have this connected to my computer and I am running this through a browser. Alrighty. This you may need to require to log in. The default username and password is going to be pi-star, and then the password is going to be raspberry. This is stock. You may have whatever you have set up on there, but just want to let people know, because some people say, hey, in the other videos I saw you click configuration, I had you log in with the username and password. What is that? That is individual to each device on there. So the first thing that we need to do and understand is that in the Pi-Star software, it's broken up into different sections. You have your host configuration setting, you have your general configuration setting, but if you notice, after each setting there is an apply change or apply changes. That is a key step when setting things up in your Pi-Star software. If you do not hit apply changes after that section is done, it may go ahead and prevent you from moving on to the next step. An example on today, you see there is no mode selected. Because there's no mode selected, you'll see that there is nothing else down here for me to get more granular on the selection that I have. And you'll see that exactly in a minute here. But since we're talking about the DMR servers and usage of selecting our AMCOM server that we're going to be using today, we first need to turn on the mode. In this case, I'm going to turn on DMR, and I'm just going to simply click that, and you notice how that soft button switch now became lit up. Now, looking over to the right side here, you see RF hang time and net hang time. The RF hang time is basically how long your Pi-Star is going to go ahead and continue your device to transmit. Okay, so your Pi-Star software in this case says, okay, my RF hang time is going to be, it's going to hold 20 seconds before it drops that carrier on there. I sometimes have a couple different things on there. You can adjust it to however you want, but the default is 20 seconds of RF hang time. And if you want to think, well, what is RF hang time? It's sort of, if you think about it, sort of like the squelch tail on an analog repeater, how long it's going to stay keyed up. You're not going to hear it, okay? You're not going to hear a like you would on a normal analog repeater, but it's going to go ahead and keep that device transmitting or keep that active on there for you. The next thing is going to be the net hang time or the network hang time. This is going to be key important if you have a device that is running multiple modes on there. It's how long is that connection is going to stay for that talk group, in this case a DMR, connected to that network before it's going to go back into like a search for the other networks on there. For this purpose today, we're just going to leave them at the default of 20 and 20. Now, as I said, I selected DMR mode, but if you notice as I scroll down here, there's no area for me to select my DMR server. The reason being is I have not hit apply changes yet. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to take a moment. So notice I just clicked it once. The apply changes went grayed. What's going to happen is now the Pi-Star software is applying these changes, and in a minute, my screen is going to go ahead and change here, and it's going to say that it's applying. Yep, there you go. It is applying the configuration. So it basically has to stop the, in essence, software from running, applying the changes, and then reboot the software on there. So now, look what happened. Now I have my DMR server, or my DMR service. I want to use DMR. I have that selected on the host configuration up here. Now, next part going to go down here is going to be your general configuration. This is kind of somewhat of an important part because you really want to get this straight away. This can be done prior to selecting a network mode. As you saw when I booted up my Pi-Star, okay, software, I went along and I had a frequency and stuff in there. So this in here, in this case, I've used this frequency 447, 5625, whatever you want to use, whatever it might be. This is my DMR ID 3155156. This is my call sign. So this is going to be the ID that's going to be broadcasted on my Pi-Star back through the networks and everything to say, hey, this is the identification of my Pi-Star device. Now I travel with this, so in here I put town and traveling, and then I put country USA, all those other particulars. Doesn't per se too much matter with DMR except for going ahead and putting in your DMR ID there. Now, as I scroll down, look what has now come up here. It says DMR configuration. This is going to be where we're going to reside and want to put in our DMR service configuration on the device. Now remember, with a Pi-Star, you can access multiple DMR servers. So that's something I really want to stress on here, because lots of times people say, well, I just click DMR, I'm trying to key up, nothing is happening. Correct, because you have to go ahead and determine this. Now, in this case here, what you have is you have it set up for DMR gateway mode. We're not using to connect to the Amcom server here, in this case, particularly Chicago 3103. We are not using a DMR gateway. This Pi-Star device, this Hotspot device, Zoom Spot device, is going to go ahead and directly connect to that server to show as an active device on there. So what I'm going to do is we need to change the DMR master type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. Now notice it's going to give me a whole series of different type of servers to log in. The first two letters really kind of dictate to which server it is. So there's the Brandmeister, the BM network, okay? DMR Plus if you want to, and it kind of goes on for there. Well, what we are under with the Amcom network is we are under the heading of FD. So in the search box, instead of scrolling all the way down to FD, which is going to take you forever and a day, simply go up to the search box here. And when you go in there, now I'm going to type FD. Now notice the minute I type in FD, it's going to go ahead and pull everything. This is where Pi-Star search function gets a little weird. If I'm going to go ahead and want to access the Amcom network, I could try going _A and kind of continue to type more and more and more. But as you notice, nothing is really changing. So what I tell people is just go ahead, select FD, and now go down to your menu here, and you're going to scroll down to where it gets to the AM. There you go. So now we see FD _AMCOMM _Chicago. Voila. This is the server we want to use or to select. In this case, in particular for the DUNoW network. This doesn't mean that you can only use the Chicago server. I want to stress that. So you could connect to the Amcom Alabama, the Arkansas, the Dallas, the Atlanta, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Miami, Southwest Link, London, all the things on there. All the Amcom servers are tied together, and for the most part, we cross out on Amcom to all the other different talk groups with other servers except Brandmeister. Brandmeister does not allow other networks and servers to come in. So if you want to talk on the DUNoW network, the Digital User Network of Wisconsin, using DMR Talkgroup 31551 to connect, cross-connect, or any other, in essence, DMR Talkgroup, you have to make sure that you know where that talk group resides. Once again, most of all the talk groups out there, if not just about all of them, are cross-moded or do reside somehow on the Amcom network. So now that I selected that, I'm going to click that. Now notice how it changed from DMR Gateway to now it says FD underscore AMCOM underscore Chicago. We've now selected it, but we haven't applied the selection change. So you see still all this stuff here and stuff like that? Nah, forget it. Hit apply changes next right away. Once again, it's going to go gray. When it goes gray, it's shutting down the software. It's going to be applying the changes, and then it's going to boot back up. So once a minute here, in a second, boom, there we go. Shut down services, applied the changes. Now it's going to boot back up here in a minute or come back into our configuration screen. And voila, now we're back in our configuration screen. Now what you want to do is DMR still the only mode selected. We're going to go down and look at that. That DMR configuration area has greatly changed, and more easily, in my opinion. Now, there's a couple things about your settings here now that you've selected that DMR master that we need to go over. I'm going to first jump down to your ESSID. Now, what that is that on the different networks, it needs some sort of ID on there. Because a lot of IDs are out there, many people have just one singular ID on there. In this case, you can use that ID and then use a sub portion of that ID, which allows you to go all the way up to 99 to note different hotspots. So if you're, for example, like me, if you have different hotspots for, let's say, one for DMR and one for P25 and one for POXAG and one for this and this and this and this, you're not going to use the same DMR ID just by itself. You can now have the chance to go ahead and select the nodes. So for example, 315515601. So we're adding the 01. That's going to be my DMR hotspot. I actually went along and chose the AS part of 25 on there, as I'm looking at my screen here, 25 on there for when I use my P25 server, okay, or P25 hotspot. In this case, this simple thing, I just choose one, okay? Now, the next thing you need to go ahead and take a look at is the color code. The color code is that access to the device. It's much like a color code on a repeater. So if you're going to have multiple hotspot devices that are set up for DMR operation on the same frequency, you need to select a color code. That's going to allow you to individually select those different hotspot devices. I personally do not recommend having a hotspot on the same frequency with the same mode because you can cause a loop. And a loop means basically that traffic is going to go over, through, and through, through again. In this case, you could select it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 15. Color code 0 is like no color code, okay? So that it's not going to decode at all. So it will hear anything that it transmits on. Once again, do not recommend that. Select it. In this case, we're going to select color code 1. Now, in the DMR options, what this field is for is if you go to our reflector board, our server board, what do you want to call it? In this case, you can go to 3103.amcom.network. So that's 3103.amcom.network. You will then go up to the dashboard of that DMR server. You can then go ahead and click, and you see selections through the whole thing. You can then go ahead and click on spots to go ahead and come up with your DMR calculator. What this spot is going to be open for is if you want to have a talk group static to your hotspot device. So in other words, if I want the DUNoW talk group to always come over my hotspot device, from the first time I plug it in to unplug it, it will always go ahead and broadcast that DUNoW traffic on talk group 31551. I can put a string of letters, words, however you call it, string in there, and then that will go ahead and tell me how my hotspot needs to do that. Once again, some people like myself, I always like to have the DUNoW talk group broadcast across my hotspot device. So therefore, in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have that talk group static to my hotspot. Any other talk group I want to go to will be what they call dynamic, meaning I will have to take my DMR radio, select that talk group on there, push the button to key it up to wake the hotspot up to say, hey, I would like to talk on this talk group. It will then connect to the network and push my traffic. When I'm done, I could either use a talk group to disconnect, or I could go ahead and wait for it to time out. But once again, the DMR options section is for mapping, so they would kind of say, static talk groups to your device. Now, once again here, in this case, I've made changes. What I need to do then is I need to click on the apply changes. Once I've clicked on the apply changes, it's going to go through the normal thing, stopping the Pi-Star software, applying the changes to it. Then once it's applied the changes to it, then it's going to go ahead and reboot back up. That's what's happening in that time frame. Now, the minute it comes back to your configuration screen, that means the changes are done and everything. The software's booted up and ready to go. Now, if we go all the way and click on dashboard at the top, now what's going to happen is now you're going to see that my mode enabled is DMR. My network status is I'm on the DMR connected network. And then more importantly, as we go ahead and take a look down here, my DMR master now is the Amcom server of Chicago. So now we know we have it in DMR mode. It is connected to the network, and it is on the Amcom Chicago server network. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful.